Our mission today is to explore that astonishing, invisible architecture of human belief.
The big one.
It really is. We're going to examine exactly how our minds generate what we call reality, and we're starting right from the ground up.
So starting with the individual.
Exactly. We're going to look at individual hallucinations first, and then we're going to scale all the way up to massive collective entities like gods, extreme political ideologies, and the literal operating systems of entire societies.
And we have an incredibly rich, diverse stack of sources to guide us through this terrain today.
We really do.
We are pulling from a fascinating synthesis of disciplines. We've got cognitive science, evolutionary psychology, mimetics, anthropology.
And some cutting-edge modern psychiatry, too.
Yes, definitely.
We've got insights from the renowned science writer and skeptic Michael Shermer, the religion scholar Jeffrey Kripal, AI researcher Joscha Bach, and the anthropologist Tanya Luhrmann.
Such a great lineup.
And we're also diving into some highly encouraging and honestly quite surprising modern medical data on schizophrenia and psychosis recovery.
It's going to reframe a lot of things for people.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
So think about this for a second, right? Have you ever looked around at the world and wondered why perfectly rational, highly intelligent, functioning people get swept up in extreme political movements?
Right.
Or like how they end up in cults,
Yeah.
or subscribing to these massive shared delusions.
I mean, it is the question of our time.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer doesn't actually lie in a lack of intelligence. No, it's not about gullibility at all. It lies in our evolutionary wiring. Our brains are practically designed to be hacked by the very communities and structures we build.
That's a strong word.
But it's true. We are walking around with prehistoric savanna-optimized hardware, and we are trying to run highly complex modern societal software on it.
Ah, okay.
The glitches that happen in that translation, well, that is where the magic and the extreme danger happens.
Well, we have to start at the biological seed of all of this, which takes us right back to that evolutionary savanna you just mentioned.
Yep, the savanna.
There's this foundational concept in evolutionary psychology called HADD. That's HADD, which stands for the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device.
What's really fascinating here is that HADD is essentially the mathematical calculation of survival that our ancestors were forced to make every single day.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine you are an early hominid.
Okay, I'm a hominid.
You are walking through the tall grass on the African savanna, and suddenly you hear a sharp rustle in the bushes to your right.
Uh-oh.
Right? You instantly have a choice to make about how to interpret that sound. You can assume it's just the wind.
Which means it's a non-agent.
Exactly. It has no intent, no mind, no consciousness. Or you can assume it's a predator, like a leopard, which possesses agency, intent, and a very strong desire to eat you.
And it comes down to a harsh evolutionary cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Like, if you guess that it's a leopard and it turns out to just be the wind, well, no big deal, right?
You survived.
You get a massive spike of adrenaline, your heart rate jumps to 150, maybe you look a little silly or paranoid in front of your tribe, but ultimately you live to see another day.
You get to pass on your genes.
Exactly. But if you guess it's the wind, and it actually is a hungry leopard,
Your lunch.
you are lunch. You are permanently removed from the gene pool. Your super laid-back, highly skeptical genetics die with you right there in the grass.
Evolution heavily favors the false positive. We are the descendants of the paranoid hominids who always assumed it was a leopard.
That makes so much sense.
Because of that, we are genetically coded to overdetect intent, consciousness, and agency in our environment.
Even when it's not there.
Right. We look at a random pattern of clouds in the sky and we immediately see human faces. We look at a burnt piece of toast and see a religious figure.
Or, like, think about when you're alone in a dark house at night.
Oh, the worst.
Suddenly, every creaking floorboard sounds like a burglar with a master plan, right?
Yep.
Your brain just hands you this fully formed narrative of an intruder sneaking up the stairs, even though logically you know it's just the house settling as the temperature drops.
But your biology is screaming, agent, intent, danger.
Right. And that leads us to the internal mechanism of how we actually process these narratives.
Yeah.
Let's look at the biological seed of the inner voice.
Yes, the inner voice.
When you and I think through a complex problem, or even just plan out our grocery list, we use inner speech. We are essentially talking to ourselves inside our own heads.
But neurologically, there is a very specific, highly complex tagging system in the brain that manages this.
Right, because otherwise it would just sound like someone else is constantly shouting at you.
Precisely. The brain has a mechanism known as corollary discharge.
Corollary discharge.
When the motor areas of your brain generate a thought or prepare to execute a movement, even the micro movements of your vocal cords, when you subvocalize a thought, your brain sends a copy of that command to your sensory cortex.
Okay.
This copy essentially flags the incoming thought or sensation with a tag that says, mine.
Oh, that's wild.
It's the same reason you can't tickle yourself. Your brain already knows the sensation's coming from you, so it dampens the response.
So when I think, I need to buy milk, my brain tags that thought with a little Post-it note that says, don't panic, this is just you.
Yes. But what happens when that highly delicate tagging system fails?
It can fit.
It absolutely can. Under conditions of extreme physical exhaustion, severe mental stress, or in neurological conditions like schizophrenia, that corollary discharge system, that internal Post-it note network, just breaks down.
Wow.
The brain is still generating the inner speech, but it fails to flag it as mine.
And this is where HED comes crashing back in, right?
Exactly. Because of our hyperactive agency detection device, the brain just hates a vacuum of intent.
Right.
When it hears a voice or registers a thought that lacks the mine tag, it immediately assumes, well, if I didn't say this, an external agent must have.
So the brain interprets its own internal biological process as an external, independent entity.
Yes.
Which brings us to an absolutely wild story from our sources. It perfectly illustrates this glitch. We need to talk about Michael Shermer.
Oh, this is a great example.
Now, for some context for you listening, Michael Shermer is a very well-known science writer and a professional skeptic. He is the founder of Skeptic magazine.
He's as rational as they come.
Right. He is a strict materialist who has spent his entire career aggressively debunking the paranormal. UFOs, ghosts, you name it. But back in 1983, he was competing in the race across America.
And this is not just a casual weekend bike ride.
Not at all.
This is a brutal 3,000-mile transcontinental nonstop bicycle race from the West Coast to the East Coast of the United States.
It is literal torture. Shermer was pushing his body to the absolute brink of failure. He was severely sleep deprived. I think he'd only slept a handful of hours over several days.
Yeah, his body was giving out.
He was physically depleted, riding through the pitch black of night on a lonely highway in Nebraska.
The environmental and physiological conditions were a perfect storm for stripping away the brain's normal reality testing filters.
How so?
Well, severe sleep deprivation completely destabilizes the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain responsible for logic, reason, and distinguishing fact from fiction.
So what happens? Shermer, the ultimate hardened skeptic, is riding down this dark highway, and he has a vivid, terrifying, multi-sensory hallucination of an alien abduction.
An alien abduction out of nowhere.
He literally saw an alien spacecraft. He saw the aliens. He believed in that moment with absolute certainty that his support team in the RV behind him had been taken over by extraterrestrials and that they were trying to abduct him.
It's incredible.
His brain, under this immense physical stress, generated a complete externalized entity.
This raises a deeply important question about the boundaries of our perception.
Yeah, it really does.
Now, from Shermer's own materialist perspective, which, by the way, he maintained after he finally got some sleep and the hallucination faded, this was a clear-cut case of the biological hardware malfunctioning under extreme duress.
Right, just a glitch.
Exactly. His brain was pushed too far, the inner speech and sensory processing lost their mind tags, and his evolutionary HADD kicked in, desperately trying to create a narrative to make sense of the overwhelming sensory chaos.
And because it was the early 80s, it grabbed an 80s trope.
Right. The brain pulled from cultural tropes in this case, 1980s alien abduction stories, to give shape to the misfiring neurons.
But I don't want to just leave it there, because the sources introduce a major, fascinating pushback against Shermer's purely materialist view.
Oh, yes. Jeffrey Kripal.
Right. Jeffrey Kripal, who is a brilliant scholar of religion and mysticism, challenged Shermer directly on this exact point.
He had a very different take.
Kripal suggested that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be so quick to write this off merely as a biological glitch.
Yeah.
He used this incredible phrase, calling the human mind a tulpa-creating machine.
Kripal's perspective is vital to this discussion because it profoundly shifts the framing.
Yeah.
He isn't necessarily saying that literal aliens from Alpha Centauri flew down to Nebraska, but he raises the possibility that consciousness might shape reality in ways that standard reductionist materialistic science doesn't fully grasp yet.
Okay, so what does that mean?
He argues that the mind isn't just passively misinterpreting random signals. It is actively, creatively constructing realities. It is a generative force.
Hold on, though. As a skeptic myself, that sounds a bit like mistal wishful thinking.
I get that.
Are we saying the alien was real just because his brain built a good model of it?
Well, not real in the sense of physical mass and titanium spaceships,
Like,
but real in its psychological and physiological impact on the host.
okay.
Kripal is pointing out that the human brain has an astonishing capacity to manifest entities that possess their own internal logic, their own distinct personalities, and the ability to act upon the individual.
Wow.
To the brain experiencing it, the distinction between a real alien and a generated alien is a distinction without a difference. The terror, the adrenaline, the memory, it is fully realized.
Okay, that makes sense. The subjective experience is 100% authentic, regardless of the objective origin. So if a single, stressed out, exhausted brain can accidentally create an alien on a lonely highway, my next question is,
What happens if you take that same neurological capacity and try to trigger it on purpose?
it's possible.
Like, what happens when perfectly healthy people intentionally try to manifest these entities? Is that even biologically possible?
It is entirely possible. In fact, it is happening all over the world right now.
Really?
Yes. And that brings us to the concept of the tulpa and the sheer power of human neuroplasticity.
Let's unpack the tulpa. Where does this concept actually come from?
The term tulpa originates from ancient Tibetan mysticism and Buddhist practices.
Okay.
Historically, it described a mind-created entity or a thought form. A practitioner, usually a highly trained monk, would spend years in deep, isolated meditation.
Years.
Years. They would intensely visualize a specific deity, a spirit, or a creature, focusing on every tiny detail, how it looked, how it sounded, its personality, until it appeared to them as a physical, independent, autonomous reality.
It's essentially intentional, controlled hallucination.
And here's where the sources get really wild. Because this isn't just some ancient, esoteric Tibetan practice lost to history.
Not at all.
The sources detail a very modern, very active internet subculture called tulpamancy.
Yes, the tulpamancers.
We are talking about otherwise perfectly healthy, everyday individuals, students, IT workers, accountants, who are actively training their neuroplasticity to create these entities.
That's a whole community.
They hang out on Reddit forums and Discord servers, sharing tips on how to build a roommate inside their own heads.
It is a stunning display of the extreme boundaries of human neuroplasticity. The brain, at its core, is the ultimate pattern-seeking machine.
Right.
Neuroplasticity relies on the principle of Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Okay, so how does that apply here?
Well, if you consistently feed your brain the instruction that there is a separate entity inhabiting your mind, and you devote immense, focused, emotional, and cognitive energy to it, a process the tulpamancy community calls forcing, right, the brain will eventually rewire itself to accommodate that instruction.
So they're literally spending hours a day meditating, talking to an imaginary character, visualizing them, sitting on the couch next to them, until the barrier between their own self and this created character finally breaks down.
Exactly. Over months or years, the brain builds the permanent neural architecture to support this belief.
That is wild.
It will begin to generate sensory inputs autonomously. The practitioner will start to experience auditory hallucinations, actually hearing the tulpa's voice. They will feel a physical sense of presence.
And the tulpa acts on its own.
Yes, the tulpa will start surprising them with opinions or jokes that the host didn't consciously author.
Oh my God.
The biological tagging system we talked about earlier, they are intentionally training it to stop flagging certain thoughts as mine.
It's like they are manually going into their brain's root directory and rewriting their own operating system.
It's exactly like that.
It's terrifying, but also incredibly impressive.
It highlights that our perception of reality is highly malleable. But Michael Shermer brings this concept out of the individual mind and into a much broader societal context with what he calls the Tinkerbell effect.
Ah, right. Like from Peter Pan.
Exactly.
Tinkerbell drinks the poison, she's dying, and she only survives because the children in the audience clap their hands and believe in her.
Yes.
Shermer argues that many of the most powerful things in our world appear real or possess immense power, solely because large groups of people collectively believe in them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Tinkerbell effect explains almost the entirety of human civilization.
Really?
Yes. Shared cultural narratives, legal systems, societal constructs, they all run on this collective belief mechanism. If everyone stops clapping, the entity dies.
I think the absolute best example of this is paper money, fiat currency.
Oh, it's a perfect example.
Paper money is technically a massive global tulpa. Think
Yeah.
about it. A $20 bill is just a blend of cotton and linen with some green ink on it. It has zero intrinsic value. You can't eat it. You can't build a shelter with it. But because all of us collectively clap our hands every single day, and we all agree that this piece of paper represents value, suddenly it rules the world.
It's a profound realization. That collective belief gives the piece of paper the power to build skyscrapers, fund armies, and dictate the course of human history.
Just because we believe it does.
Exactly. The power doesn't reside in the paper. It resides entirely in the synchronized neural networks of the people believing in it.
And that shared belief mechanism, that synchronization, it accelerates incredibly when we look at intense social settings, doesn't it?
Oh, drastically.
What takes months of lonely, exhausting mental strain for an internet tulpamancer in their bedroom can apparently happen in a matter of minutes in a highly charged group setting.
That is what psychologists refer to as the echo effect, or social contagion.
Social contagion.
Right. When you put humans in a group, our individual sensory processing gets outsourced to the collective. This brings us perfectly to the work of Tanya Luhrmann, an anthropologist highlighted in our sources.
Yes, Tanya Luhrmann's work is fascinating. She's spent years embedding herself in charismatic religious congregations, the types of churches where people frequently report hearing the literal voice of God, or speaking in tongues, or feeling overwhelming physical manifestations of the Holy Spirit.
And she wanted to understand how they were experiencing this.
Exactly, and she coined this brilliant concept of absorption.
Absorption is not just a vague idea, it is a measurable cognitive trait. Psychologists actually use tools like the Telligent Absorption Scale to measure it.
What does he measure exactly?
It's the capacity to become deeply engrossed in sensory or imaginative experiences to the point where your internal world becomes as vivid and compelling as the external world.
Okay, give me an example.
Think of someone who gets so lost in a novel that they literally don't hear someone calling their name in the same room.
Oh, yeah. My sister does that all the time.
Right.
And Luhrmann found that these charismatic congregations aren't just magically full of highly absorbent people.
No.
The churches are actively, systematically training their members in it.
Precisely. They are teaching people how to focus their attention inward. Through guided prayer, repetitive worship music, and deeply emotional sermons, they guide the individual to amplify their inner thoughts and feelings.
Let's walk through the mechanics of that, because the environment plays a huge role.
Okay.
Imagine you walk into one of these services.
Okay, picture it.
You have hundreds of people in a room, the lighting is low, the music is swelling, usually with repetitive, hypnotic chord progressions.
Very deliberate.
The emotional stakes are incredibly high, people are crying, and everyone around you is testifying that they physically hear a voice or feel a presence.
In that environment, your brain's critical, rational filters, that prefrontal cortex skepticism, just drops.
It just turns off.
Humans are deeply social, tribal animals. We have a profound biological desire to belong to the group and a deep unconscious fear of being ostracized.
So the social pressure to conform, combined with the sensory overload, just overwhelms the skepticism.
Yes.
If you have an internal thought during that deeply emotional prayer, say, a sudden feeling of peace, or an inner voice saying, "You are forgiven," your brain, primed by the group's expectation, stops tagging it as mine.
That's the corollary discharge failing again.
Right. You are essentially being trained to interpret your own inner monologue as the physical, externalized voice of God.
And it works beautifully. The collective expectation acts as a massive amplifier.
Wow.
The group environment provides the psychological scaffolding that helps the individual brain cross the threshold from a quiet internal thought to profound externalized experience. The congregation acts as a collective incubator for the tulpa.
Okay, so we've seen how a single mind creates an entity under stress, like Shermer. We've seen how internet hobbyists do it intentionally. We've seen how small groups or congregations can accelerate it through absorption. But what happens when we zoom out completely? What happens when an entire society, a massive civilization of millions, builds one of these entities?
To understand that scale, we need to look at the work of Joscha Bach.
Joscha Bach.
He is an AI researcher and cognitive scientist, and his framework for understanding this completely reframes the history of human civilization.
It really does.
He proposes looking at society not just as a group of people, but as a giant, functioning operating system.
This part of the deep dive completely blew my mind, but I have to admit, I bristled at it at first. Let's break this down.
Let's do it.
He's suggesting that we look at concepts like God or a supreme political ideology, not as supernatural beings or abstract philosophies, but as a collective neuromental architecture,
Yes.
an operating system for a culture. So he is literally saying human society is a distributed computer.
Yes, that is the exact metaphor he uses. Think of a massive cloud computing network. You have thousands or millions of individual processors all wired together to run a program that is too large for any single processor to handle.
Okay.
In Bach's model, the individual human brains are those processors.
Okay, but why? Why do we need to network together to run a giant program? Why can't we just exist as individuals?
It comes down to the math of human biology and scaling.
Scaling.
Humans are tribal by nature. We evolved to live in tight-knit groups of maybe 150 people. That number is famous in sociology. It's called Dunbar's number.
Right, Dunbar's number.
Yeah.
It suggests that the human brain only has the cognitive capacity to maintain stable, meaningful social relationships with about 150 people.
Yeah.
Like, you know who the good hunters are, you know who the gossips are, you know who to trust. It's like your Facebook friends list before it gets out of hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Within a group of 150, you don't need complex laws or massive ideological structures to maintain order. Biology and interpersonal empathy do the work.
Because everyone knows everyone.
Right. If you steal from your neighbor, everyone knows, and you get kicked out of the tribe. But as human civilization grew, we faced a massive scaling problem.
Yeah.
How do you coordinate a city of 1 million people or an empire of 1 billion? You are surrounded by strangers, people you will never meet, yet you have to trade with them, share resources with them, and not kill each other.
You can't do it with just biological empathy. Your brain literally doesn't have the RAM to care about 1 million strangers.
Exactly. You need software.
Yeah.
You need a coordination protocol that sits above the biological level.
So enter the virtual superagent.
Yes. The network of human brains creates a shared set of rules, grand narratives, and moral laws. This collective God Tulpa, or a supreme national ideology, provides the operating system.
And that dictates behavior.
It dictates how everyone should behave, what is considered sacred, what is taboo, and how to resolve disputes. Because everyone is running the same software, a merchant in ancient Rome can trade with a farmer hundreds of miles away, confident they both fear the same gods and follow the same rules.
I want to push back on this just a little, representing the listener who might be feeling a bit defensive right now.
Fair enough.
Isn't that an incredibly cold, reductionist way to look at thousands of years of profound, subjective, spiritual, and cultural experience?
I can see why it feels that way.
To just reduce Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel or the American Constitution to, like, I-key networking, doesn't that strip the humanity out of it?
It's a completely fair critique, and it does sound stark. But Bach isn't necessarily stripping the humanity or the beauty out of it. He is explaining the structural mechanics beneath it.
Okay.
To say a cathedral is made of stone and math doesn't diminish the awe you feel standing inside it.
That's a good point.
Bach is simply pointing out that this collective software is an evolutionary necessity. Without these massive virtual superagents, large-scale human cooperation is impossible. We would just fracture back into warring tribes of 150 people.
So, if we are the processors running this code, does that mean religion or nationalism or deep ideological devotion isn't some sort of evolutionary mistake or primitive superstition?
Well,
it's actually an inevitable advanced byproduct of our brains networking together.
that is the core, brilliant insight of this entire framework. It is an evolutionary feature, not a bug.
Wow.
The biological individual has the innate capacity to produce internal agents. We saw that with Shermer's H80D misfiring. The local group has the power to synchronize and amplify those agents through rituals. We saw that with Luhrmann's absorption.
Right.
And over generations, the vast network of millions of people creates a permanent virtual superagent that outlives any single human being.
It's a self-sustaining system. But there is a massive, somewhat terrifying paradox here.
There is.
We create the system. We as biological humans write the code with our collective belief.
Yeah.
We invent the gods, we draft the constitutions, but once that system exists in the network, it begins to program us.
That is the terrifying beauty of the system. The virtual superagent has a life of its own. It evolves.
It mutates.
Yes, it mutates to survive different historical eras, economic crashes, and famines. And to ensure its own survival, it must program its human hosts to protect it. Once the operating system is running and fully entrenched, the biological individual becomes secondary to the survival of the network.
And that leads us to a really dark place. Because if these societal operating systems are built and optimized for their own survival, how do they react when they bump into a rival operating system?
No, well.
What happens when one god tulpa meets another? We have to talk about mimetic warfare.
Let's start with the concept of mimetics, which was originally popularized by Richard Dawkins.
Okay.
Mimetics is the idea that cultural ideas, religions, and secular ideologies act as mind viruses or cultural genes.
Mind viruses.
Just as biological genes ruthlessly fight for survival and replication in the physical environment, memes, which in this academic sense means units of culture, not internet jokes.
Right, not the cat pictures.
Exactly. These memes fight for survival in the cognitive environment of human brains.
They want to be shared, they want to be believed, and they want to eradicate competing ideas.
Yes.
And according to Bach's framework, this scales up to actual physical warfare. He frames war not just as a tragedy of human hatred, but as a literal algorithmic conflict between two different operating systems fighting over hardware.
Exactly. And in this context, the hardware they are fighting over is land, physical resources, and most importantly, human brains.
Wow.
The ideology needs more processors to increase its processing power and ensure its dominance.
Now, before we dive into the grim mechanics of how these ideologies force humans to fight, I think we need to be incredibly clear about something for you, the listener, because we are touching on the live wires of society here.
Absolutely. It is crucial to state that when we discuss how secular ideologies, modern political extremism, whether we are talking about the far left or the far right nationalism, or religious movements function as these collective tulpas that demand submission, we are looking at this purely through an anthropological and psychological lens.
Right. And Bach isn't making a moral judgment about whether these specific political or religious movements are fundamentally right or wrong.
Not at all.
He's acting almost like an alien anthropologist observing Earth. He's looking at the math of how they spread. We are not endorsing or condemning any specific viewpoint. We are just impartially reporting the frameworks presented in the source material to understand the viral mechanics of human behavior.
Exactly. Left-wing, right-wing, secular, religious. The biological hijacking looks identical on an MRI.
Well said. So the question is, how does an abstract operating system convince a biological organism, a human being whose deepest, most hardwired biological imperative is to stay alive, to go to war, and potentially die for an idea?
It achieves this through a mechanism called the externalization of conscience.
This is where the history gets incredibly heavy. The sources bring up stark historical examples to illustrate this. They talk about the child sacrifices in ancient Carthage to the god Baal, or the biblical story of Abraham being asked by God to sacrifice his own son, Isaac. In both scenarios, the individual essentially unplugs their innate biological empathy.
Right.
A mother in Carthage obviously loved her child biologically, but she stopped listening to her own internal moral compass because she had successfully outsourced her conscience to the collective agent.
The operating system tells her, your biological instinct is wrong. The survival of the city, the favor of the gods requires this.
That's chilling.
And the mechanism that makes this psychological override possible is known as de-individuation.
Let's break down the biology of de-individuation, because it's not just a state of mind, it is a physical change in the brain.
Yes. When people engage in highly synchronized, repetitive group activities, this could be an army marching in unison, a massive crowd chanting at a political rally, or a congregation singing and praying together. Neurological changes actually occur.
What happens?
The brain's default mode network physically dampens and quietens down.
For those who might not know, what exactly is the default mode network?
The default mode network, or DMN, is a network of interacting brain regions, primarily the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex.
Okay.
It is the part of your brain that is active when you are daydreaming, reflecting on yourself, thinking about your past, or planning your personal future.
So it's like the me part.
It is essentially the neurological seat of your ego, your autobiographical memory, and your sense of individual self-esteem. It is the I.
So when you are marching or chanting with 10,000 other people, the specific parts of your brain that say, I am John, I am a father, I have these personal fears, they literally shut down.
They go offline.
The literal sense of I goes quiet, and the we takes over the wheel.
Yeah.
You are no longer the author of your actions. You are an instrument of the operating system.
And when the individual ego is suppressed, the operating system can construct what is known as the epistemic prison.
The epistemic prison. I find that term so haunting, yet it perfectly describes how these ideologies become completely airtight.
It really does.
An epistemic prison is a bubble of truth built by the system where the system itself can never, ever be disproved by external evidence.
It creates a perfectly sealed logic loop. If things go well for the group, the harvest is good, the economy booms, the battle is won, the ideology says, see, the idea is good, the system works, our God is pleased.
But if things go terribly wrong,
Mm-hmm.
say a doomsday prophecy fails to come true, or a radical economic policy ruins the country and people were starving, the system never says, oh, I guess the ideology is flawed.
Never.
The system flips it and says, you didn't believe hard enough, the group didn't sacrifice enough, there are impurities among us.
In an epistemic prison, doubt is no longer viewed as a natural, healthy process of critical thinking. Doubt is reframed as an external enemy agent.
Wow.
If you question the system, you aren't just confused, you are infected. You are a threat to the hardware.
It's easy to look back at ancient Carthage and think, wow, those ancient people were deeply misguided.
Right.
But we see the exact same architecture happening right now in modern internet radicalization and algorithmic filter bubbles.
Oh, absolutely.
The technology changed, but the neurohacking remains identical.
The game theory is exactly the same. Why do people obey destructive orders or buy into extreme conspiracy theories today? Because the system frames the stakes as purely existential.
Everything is life or death.
Inside the epistemic prison, it's never just a calm disagreement over tax policy or healthcare. The operating system tells the host, if we lose this election or if this rival political group gains power, our entire way of life, our entire tribe will be annihilated. It is a cosmic battle between good and evil.
The biological drive to survive is completely hijacked to force blind obedience. It's a biological analogy. The individual human becomes like a single white blood cell in the human body.
That's a great way to put it.
If the body detects a massive infection, millions of white blood cells will hurl themselves at the pathogen and die willingly to save the whole organism. It's altruistic suicide.
Yes.
The ideology convinces the person that their individual destruction, their martyrdom, their social ruin, their imprisonment is absolutely necessary for the survival of the grand virtual superagent.
It is a profound vulnerability in our cognitive hardware. We are so desperate for connection, for meaning, and for the safety of the tribe that we will sacrifice our own individual perception of reality and sometimes our lives for the sake of the collective network.
Okay, that is a deeply terrifying place to pause.
Yeah, it's heavy.
If our biological software is truly this vulnerable, if we are this easily hacked by these societal operating systems, and they're literally designed to trap us in these epistemic prisons, what do we do?
We have options.
How do we protect our minds? How do we build cognitive antivirus software?
The good news from the sources is that we are not entirely helpless. While we cannot delete our social programming, we are always going to be social, pattern-seeking animals who need community. We can absolutely install proactive antivirus software.
Thank goodness.
The sources outline 4 main strategies to protect the individual mind. The first is cognitive immunization, which is also known in psychology as inoculation theory.
I love this concept. It's the idea that you can learn how psychological manipulation works before you actually encounter it in the wild.
Like a vaccine.
Exactly. It works exactly like a physical vaccine.
Ah.
You give the brain a weakened dose of a manipulative tactic, so your cognitive immune system knows how to identify and fight the real thing when a cult leader or an extremist politician tries to use it on you.
Exactly. The core practice of cognitive immunization is shifting your analytical focus away from what an idea is saying and looking intensely at how the idea is trying to make you feel.
So focus on the emotion.
Yes. Totalitarian ideas, cult-like systems, and viral conspiracy theories all rely on a very specific set of archetypes and emotional triggers. They rely heavily on inducing fear, weaponizing guilt, or promising a euphoric sense of hyper-belonging.
They always, without fail, use the us versus them narrative. They strip the world of nuance and create an in-group of pure victims and an out-group of pure evil. If you learn to recognize that architectural structure, then when someone comes to you with a brand new political theory or a religious dogma that relies on that framing, your brain flags it.
The alarm bells go off.
Right, the alarm bells go off because you recognize the manipulative framework completely, regardless of whether the actual content is left-wing, right-wing or extraterrestrial.
Strategy 2 is metacognition. This is the daily maintenance of preserving the I.
Preserving the I.
It is the deliberate practice of thinking about what you are thinking. It requires a constant, active awareness of your own mental state. You have to routinely pause and ask yourself, wait, why do I actually believe this?
Right.
Did I arrive at this conclusion through evidence, or am I just outsourcing my conscience to the group right now because it feels safe?
And that leads perfectly into strategy 3, which I honestly think is the most practical, actionable advice in this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
Epistemic pluralism. This simply means diversifying your identity across multiple non-overlapping networks.
This is critical. If a totalitarian idea or a cult wants to take over your hard drive, it requires a total monopoly on your life.
It needs everything.
It needs a monopoly on your time, your relationships, your finances, and your sense of self-worth. If your entire life, your friends, your job, your hobbies, your weekend plans are all tied up in one single ideological, political, or religious group, the cost of leaving that group is total social death. You are trapped.
But if you consciously practice epistemic pluralism, you spread that risk out. Paint a picture of a healthy pluralistic life.
Okay.
You are part of a local intramural sports club. You have a professional networking group in your career field. You have a distinct group of friends from college who don't care about your politics. Maybe you volunteer at an animal shelter on weekends.
That's a great mix.
By physically and mentally moving between these different spheres, you force your brain to constantly switch operating systems.
Exactly. When you play soccer, you follow the rules of the soccer tulpa. When you are at work, you follow the professional corporate tulpa. You never allow one single virtual agent to gain complete, unchecked control over your hardware.
It creates a natural biological system of checks and balances within your own mind. Which brings us to the final strategy, courtesy of Joscha Bach. Intellectual humility.
Humility is key.
You must always, always remember that our ideas, our ideologies, and our deeply held beliefs are just maps. They are not the actual terrain.
The map is never the territory. A map is a highly simplified 2D drawing designed to help you navigate a wildly complex 3D world.
Right.
When people forget that when they begin to believe that their specific ideological map is the literal, absolute, objective truth of the universe, that is when they become dangerous. That is when they are willing to burn down the actual territory to make it fit their map.
We need to view these collective narratives as what they are. Tools for human cooperation. And like a hammer or a saw, if a tool starts harming the people using it, it needs to be updated, fixed, or entirely discarded.
This really highlights the vital role of the allied doubter within any community.
Yes, the allied doubter. It takes massive, almost unbelievable courage to stay inside a group, to genuinely love and participate in a community, but fiercely hold the line to your own fundamental empathy.
It does.
To be the one person in the room who raises their hand during the meeting and says, hey, I love this group, but are we sure about this? This seems harmful. That allied doubter is the wedge that keeps the epistemic prison door from fully swinging shut and locking.
And we should definitely clarify here as we talk about all this antivirus software that not all tulpas or collective operating systems are inherently bad or malicious.
Of course not.
We literally need them to survive as a species.
Right. Concepts like universal human rights, the scientific method, the concept of a fair trial or democracy itself, these are all virtual structures. You can't put human rights in a wheelbarrow and weigh it.
Right.
They are collective tulpas. But they are healthy tulpas. They are uniquely designed with built-in checks and balances specifically intended to protect the individual biological host, rather than demanding the host blindly sacrifice themselves for the glory of the system.
We have spent a lot of time talking about protecting society at large and defending ourselves from massive ideological viruses that infect millions.
Yeah.
But what happens when the battle for reality isn't happening on a societal scale? What happens when this desperate battle for truths fought entirely within a single human mind, where the operating system has completely and catastrophically crashed?
This brings us to our final, and honestly most hopeful, section of the deep dive. Reclaiming the hard drive.
This is the best part.
We are going to look closely at severe schizophrenia, the process of cult extraction, and how people actually physically get their minds back.
It's amazing.
The sources provide this incredibly moving, real-world anecdote of an individual who successfully broke free from severe, debilitating schizophrenia. And the mechanism he used is fascinating. He did it by doing the exact opposite of the internet tulpamancers we talked about earlier.
It is a remarkable testament to the brain's resilience. For decades, the general public perception and even the medical consensus regarding schizophrenia was that it was a life sentence.
That's what I always thought.
It was viewed as a permanent, irreversible break from reality, a one-way ticket into the dark. But modern psychiatric data paints a radically different, much more hopeful picture.
The data from the World Health Organization is staggering, especially if you grew up with those old stereotypes.
It really is.
The WHO data shows that at least 33 to 40% of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia will fully recover.
Fully recover.
And if they manage to get targeted treatment during their first episode, what psychiatrists call first episode psychosis, up to 57% of patients reach clinical recovery. That is a majority.
The shift in psychiatric care over the last few decades has been nothing short of revolutionary. Historically, the approach in the mid to late 20th century was tragic.
How was?
The primary tool was just dampening the symptoms with heavy, blunt force sedatives. Drugs like Thorazine were sometimes referred to as chemical lobotomies.
Ugh, it's awful.
We were essentially numbing the patient so severely that they wouldn't have the energy to react to the terrifying voices in their head. But in doing so, we completely numbed their motivation, their personality, and their entire drive to live. They were trapped in a fog.
The old medications just blocked dopamine receptors entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's the wanting molecule.
Right.
If you block it, the person doesn't want to do anything.
Right.
But now we're entering the era of precision medicine. The sources highlight a massive breakthrough. A recently FDA-approved medication called Cobenfy.
Cobenfy.
This is a total game changer because it doesn't just blanket block dopamine. It works on entirely different chemical pathways, specifically targeting muscarinic receptors in the brain.
That's huge.
It manages to clear the hallucinations and quiet the voices without numbing the patient's motivation or cognitive abilities. They don't get that zombie effect.
And medication is only half the battle. When you combine that new precision medicine with modern, highly targeted cognitive behavioral therapies, specifically something called recovery-oriented cognitive therapy, or CTR, you get profound results.
What's the focus of CTR?
It's a massive paradigm shift. Instead of spending all the therapy sessions just attacking the sickness and talking about the hallucinations, CTR is heavily focused on strengthening the healthy underlying identity of the patient.
This goes back to the anecdote of the man who reversed his condition.
Yeah.
He was plagued by a hostile, commanding voice in his head.
Yeah.
But instead of arguing with the voice, he used techniques like reality testing and what the sources vividly call conscious ignorance.
Conscious ignorance.
Think about neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
Neurons that fire together wire together. If you fight the voice in your head, you are giving it massive emotional energy and attention, which actually strengthens the neural pathways supporting the hallucination. You are feeding the tulpa.
Exactly. So he actively starved it. He forced his neuroplasticity to work in reverse.
How?
When the voice yelled at him, he practiced conscious ignorance. He would literally turn his back and focus entirely on external, meaningful physical activities.
Like what?
He would go build a shed in his backyard. He would play his guitar. He focused all his cognitive energy outward into the physical territory rather than the internal map.
And because the brain is highly efficient, if you stop using a neural pathway, the brain prunes it.
Mm-hmm.
By ignoring the voice, the synapses supporting the hallucination physically weakened, withered away, and eventually lost their power.
It is ultimately about demystifying the voice. In severe psychosis, the hallucination feels omnipotent. It feels like an all-powerful god or a demon or a government conspiracy. The absolute turning point in recovery is when the patient can look at the experience and recognize, this is not a supernatural agent. This is not a demon. This is a faulty biological signal in my auditory cortex.
Wow.
The moment you name it as a biological glitch, the entity loses its omnipotence. That realization completely shifts the power dynamic back to the host.
And what absolutely blows my mind as we tie all these threads together is the parallel the sources draw between the psychiatric recovery from schizophrenia and the very real process of extracting someone from a cult or an extreme ideological bubble.
The psychological architecture of recovery in both scenarios is nearly identical.
Really?
Yes. If you have a loved one who has fallen down a radical internet rabbit hole or joined a high-control group, you cannot just aggressively argue against their delusion.
Oh, no.
If you attack the cult's dogma with facts and logic, the person's epistemic prison defenses will instantly activate. Their operating system will view you as the enemy agent, and they will double down and cut you off.
Right. You can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into.
Exactly.
Instead, just like in CTR, you have to validate the underlying human feeling, not the delusion. You validate their innate human need for community or their underlying fear of an uncertain future.
You bypass the viral operating system entirely.
Yes, your goal is to awaken their old, healthy self that has been suppressed.
You do this by reconnecting them with the physical reality of who they were before the radicalization took hold. You talk about old, shared memories that have nothing to do with the ideology.
You play the music they loved as a teenager, you revisit their old hobbies, you take them hiking in a place they used to love.
Yes.
And this isn't just sentimental Hallmark card advice, it is hard neurological science. By engaging with those past passions and physical realities, you are physically reactivating the neural networks, specifically lighting up that suppressed default mode network of their original healthy identity.
And as that old, authentic network lights up and gains strength, the new radicalized programming is starved of energy and naturally weakens.
It is a stunning, hopeful display of the brain's plasticity. The exact same biological mechanism that allows a mind to accidentally create an external agent on a dark highway or be co-opted by a massive societal operating system also provides the sovereign, undeniable power to unwrite them.
It means that beneath all these ideological maps, beneath all the virtual operating systems and cultural tulpas we build to survive, the biological, true terrain of the human mind is inherently resilient.
There he is.
It is capable of immense structural healing. If the brain can build the architecture of a delusion, it possesses the exact tools needed to dismantle it.
Which brings us full circle. We have covered an immense, complex amount of ground today.
We really have.
Just to recap our journey for a moment, we started out on a lonely Nebraska highway with Michael Shermer's alien hallucination, looking at how our biological hardware or a hyperactive agency detection device can wildly misfire under stress. We moved from there to the internet tulpamancers, proving that humans can actually manually hack their neuroplasticity to create separate entities in their own minds.
We then scaled that concept up to the massive societal level with Joscha Bach's framework. We examined how religions, nations, and ideologies function as collective operating systems.
Right. Distributed computers running on the wet hardware of human brains, coordinating our complex society, but often ruthlessly hijacking our survival instincts through mimetic warfare.
We looked at the terrifying reality of the epistemic prison and how our sense of self is shut down through de-individuation.
But we didn't stay in the dark. We mapped out the escape routes, cognitive immunization, metacognition, and the absolute daily necessity of epistemic pluralism.
Yes.
And finally, we saw the ultimate proof of human resilience in how modern psychiatry, precision medicine, and cult extraction use that exact same neuroplasticity to reclaim the mind from the deepest, darkest operating system crashes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a highly practical reminder.
That's it.
As you go through your week, every time you interact with a deeply held cultural belief, or you see a trending, outrage-fueled political movement online, or you are drawn to a highly charismatic community, remember the architecture we discussed today.
Yeah.
Remember that you are interacting with a collective thought form, a virtual super agent that wants your processing power. Check your epistemic pluralism. Do an audit of your life and ensure that you belong to multiple, completely different worlds so that no single map ever becomes your only reality.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own. It's a natural extension of everything we've talked about.
Ooh, okay.
We've spent this entire deep dive establishing that human societies act as distributed computers, actively creating virtual super agents, these massive, invisible societal tulpas to govern us, tell us what is moral, and coordinate our behavior.
Right.
So what happens when we start plugging actual physical artificial intelligence into that network? If our collective beliefs and ideologies are already functioning as autonomous software programs running on human brains, are we currently programming our next ultimate collective tulpa in a server farm somewhere?
That is a terrifying thought.
And if so, what kind of operating system is it going to force us to run? Something to keep you up at night.
Definitely.
But I hope today we've managed to put some contrast dye into the system.
I think we have.
I hope you can see the structures, the glitches, the evolutionary traps, and most importantly, the incredible inherent healing power of your own mind a little more clearly. Keep questioning your maps, keep diversifying your networks, and as always, keep diving deep.